Hey, Larken Rose here. So the most recent Josie the Outlaw video about supporting the troops is out and offending lots of people, as expected, but also lots of other people are saying, yeah, right on, including a bunch of veterans, which is pretty cool. Thought I'd add a few thoughts of my own. Oh, first of all, here's the link to watch the video if you want to. It's only 2.5 minutes long, short and to the point, and I thought I'd throw in a couple thoughts of my own. Tyrants always feed off of fear-mongering, and their best trick is fear of the unknown. If a tyrant can say, this horrible bad thing is going to happen to you unless I have lots of power, most people are going to fall for it. And the details change, the template doesn't. They'll say, you'll be starving to death and poor if you don't give me the power to build a giant welfare state. Or you'll be victimized by all these nasty people if you don't give me the power to build a giant police state. Or terrorists will be blowing you up if you don't give me the power to spy on everybody and frisk you at airports and this and that and the other thing. And then, of course, the military one of, we're going to be invaded by foreign powers if you don't give me the power to have a giant military. And people are so easy to scare, and they think, well, if there's even a possibility that that's true, then we have to do something. And by do something, the politicians always mean increase government power and decrease individual freedom. That's always the proposed solution. And a perfect example of this template, and the thing is, people never even think out, well, what is the actual threat of that? You know, is this thing that he's trying to scare us with, is that at all real? Does it match reality? Does it match my own experience? I mean, the overall thing of the main complaint of anarchy is if we didn't have a ruling class, we would all be violent animals killing and eating each other. Why does anybody think that? I mean, do they think that about themselves? That, hey, if there weren't politicians telling me what to do, I'd just be a complete freaking maniac. I have yet to meet anybody who thinks that, but they've been duped into thinking the rest of the world would be complete freaking maniacs if there weren't politicians taking their money and bossing them around. So, but the example of this template that I want to talk about today, you can see it in the bumper stickers that say, if you love your freedoms, thank a veteran. My question is, why? Why should I thank a veteran if I love freedom? Now, for anybody who's going to wet their pants that I would even ask such a question, if there's a decent answer, give me the decent answer. Now, the specific thing I've been asking a whole bunch of nationalists in the comment section under Josie's video about supporting the troops is, when you say, you only have the freedom to say these things because of what the troops have done. Okay, if that is true, then tell me exactly who it is who would have come here, conquered and enslaved 100 million armed Americans, and the other 200 million that aren't, and taken away our freedom of speech, if not for what the U.S. military is doing. Who would have done that? Who are we supposed to be scared of? Who is it that would have come here and taken away our freedoms if not for the military blowing crap up in Iraq and Afghanistan and here and there and everywhere? Who are we supposed to be scared of? In this case, there isn't even a real threat to exaggerate. You have to all the way make it up. I mean, nobody in their right mind would say, well, Iraq, if we didn't go and stop them when they went into Kuwait, they would have conquered the U.S. and banned dissent. Like, nobody really thinks that who has any brain. Now, mind you, what Saddam did, what every ruling class does, is evil and unjustified, and defending against them is perfectly moral and justified. I'm not saying everybody else around the world is so nice. I mean, people think in these categories and their brain gets stuck so that they think all there is political left and political right. So if you say, I oppose what the military is doing, some people say, oh, you think everyone in the world's going to be nice? No, lots of nasty people in the world. Adding more nasty people doesn't help. And some people will say, and they even said this under Josie's video when she openly says, it's not because I'm a pacifist. I believe in the use of force to defend against aggression. Oh, you must be a pacifist if you don't like the military. So people's brains just slide into these categories, and they can't think clearly about actual concepts. But I want a specific answer. Who am I supposed to be scared of? Who would be here taking away my freedoms if not for what the U.S. troops are doing all over the place. Who do you think has the ability to forcibly subjugate and enslave 100 million Americans? I mean, the best argument I've ever heard, which is really bad, but it's the best one, is, well, if not for what the troops did in World War II, we'd all be speaking German. And that's like the cliche thing to say. And even there I say, well, describe specifically what you think would have happened. Now, never mind the fact that there was no indication that Hitler had any hopes or dreams of conquering the U.S. It never made any indication of that. And again, what he did was totally evil. He deserved somebody blowing his damn head off. But to say that the military is why we're free, well, then explain to me what would have happened. Germany would have actually occupied the U.S. and 100 million armed Americans would say, well, darn, I guess you're our new bosses and we're just not going to defend anything. Is that really what anybody thinks? We'd all be speaking German. No, we wouldn't. And that is the best argument that statists have, is World War II, because here's this big group of powers in Japan and Germany and Austria and all that. The closest thing there's ever been to an actual threat. Now, during the Cold War, they pretended that the Soviet Union was just about to come take us over. That was just a joke the whole time. But now there isn't even that. Now it's, well, there's the war on terror, there's Al-Qaeda. They hate our freedoms. Like, what are they going to do about it? Some guy living in a cave in Afghanistan is going to sneak over here and somehow subjugate 300 million Americans. Just by some magic trick. But luckily, we have the U.S. troops protecting our freedoms by going after that guy in a cave. They're not protecting our freedoms. There is one threat in the world to the freedom of the American people. It is the United States government. It is the only gang that has any intention or any ability of violating the individual rights of the American people. And the only reason it has that ability is because the people hallucinate legitimacy to it. They imagine it to be authority and government. They imagine an obligation to pay tribute to it in the form of taxes and bow to its so-called laws. It's the only gang that can do it because it's the only one that has duped the American people into feeling an obligation to obey. Nobody else could do it. There are about 100 million gun owners in this country. Among them, they own about 300 million guns. So if we were actually invaded, they could lend one to each of their unarmed friends, and then we'd have 300 million armed Americans. There is no force on earth that could do anything to subjugate us except the gang that is able to dupe most of the American people into feeling an obligation to obey it and pay tribute to it, which is the U.S. government. And that is the gang that the U.S. military works for. It is the gang they serve. So no, I don't thank a veteran if I like my freedoms because they haven't done anything to preserve my freedoms. Now you can say they fought against bad people, and that is totally true. And again, defensive force, whether you have a uniform or not, is perfectly justified. If somebody is attacking somebody innocent, I'm glad if somebody stops the aggressor. Trouble is, government militaries never limit themselves to being purely defensive. They are always an aggressor. And I'll get to why that is in a second. But yeah, so statists never like to answer the question, well, who exactly would be here taking away my freedom if not for what the U.S. military is doing? And they can't even say. I can't even keep track of how many times I asked that in the comment section under Josie's videos. Nobody will really say, well, there's just sort of some vague threat out there. Terrorism or something would have somehow taken away our freedoms by magic if not for the U.S. military going around blowing crap up all over the place constantly. Now, Americans like to think that they're progressive and care about freedom and care about the whole world and yada, yada, yada. But there's still some major pack mentality going on, some major nationalistic bias. And a bunch of people brought this up in the comment section. Well, what if the same thing happened to us that is happening to the people of Iraq or Afghanistan or, pick your favorite country where U.S. troops are driving around in tanks? China declares, we think the U.S. government is oppressing its people, which, by the way, would be true. So China sends over its military, and never mind that this is logistically impossible. It's a rhetorical question. Imagine it happened. And they're driving tanks up and down your neighborhood, saying, we are protecting you from your government. And by the way, in order to protect you from your government, we may have to like go to door, kicking down doors and pointing guns at everybody and questioning people just in case there's any bad people. Oh, and by the way, we're going to take your guns away, of course, for your own good, for your safety. How would you respond? Would you go, oh, good, our saviors are here? Or would you say, there's a foreign invading army in our town threatening us, violating our individual rights, let's defend ourselves? That's what I would do, and it's what a lot of people in Iraq would do, and a lot of people in Afghanistan would do, and a lot of people around the world would do when the exact same thing is done by U.S. troops. And seriously, unless you would really say, oh, thank you, Chinese army, for taking away my guns and searching me at random and stopping me on the road and making curfews, telling me I'm not allowed to be outside in my own neighborhood at night, unless you would actually say, thanks for doing that and saving us, Mr. Chinese army, then why on earth would you support the troops doing the exact same thing to somebody else? And why would you be upset and outraged that there are insurgents who fight back? If somebody did that to me, I would fight back. The only reason people do this double standard is because they're still stuck in the nationalistic mindset. They think the flag on the shoulder matters, that morality changes based on which uniform you're using. It doesn't. And this is the thing. The U.S. troops swear to uphold the Constitution. Now, legally speaking, the Constitution applies inside the magical invisible line that defines the territory of the U.S. ruling class, known as the country of the United States of America. Legally, it doesn't apply outside of that line. But what the founders actually expressed in the Bill of Rights were saying, hey, these are inalienable human rights. All men. Not the people who happen to be standing on a piece of dirt that a bunch of crooks in D.C. claim the right to rule. These are inherent to mankind. Now, if that's what they said, why don't the U.S. troops believe that? If they swore an oath to uphold the Constitution and they view that as that's the spirit of the Constitution, why are they constantly violating those rights on the other side of the world? As if, well, when you step over the line, morality completely changes. All the rules change. Right and wrong are just out the window or turned upside down. Because if you look what troops actually do, just some basic comparisons. I know lots and lots of gun owners. They all know the basics of gun safety. You don't point a gun at somebody if you don't have the justification to kill them. You treat every gun as if it's loaded, yada, yada, yada. A lot of you already know these rules. Then you watch videos of troops in, whatever country around the world. They're pointing their guns at people at random. They're not watching where they're shooting. Even when there is combat, they seem to just be paying no attention to the fact that they're in a city with 1 million people within range of their stray bullets. Imagine the same thing applied here. Well, there are these really bad people in this building, in this city, so we're just shelling it. Bullets are flying around and raining down on the rest of the city, and we're just wildly firing machine guns and rocket launchers into this building with stuff flying everywhere. And golly gee, if there's some collateral damage, if a few people walking by get killed, well, that's too bad, because the people in that building are so bad that we have to do this. Nobody would accept that. The funny thing is, well, it isn't funny, it's sad. That happened when Philadelphia firebombed itself. The MOVE incident years and years ago, where it happened and people are like, what are you doing? You're bombing yourself. Ah! So if it happened in the U.S., nobody would accept it. Nobody would say that's okay. As long as there's bad people in the building. If you're just randomly blowing stuff up and a bunch of civilians die in the process, well, that's the price we pay to get those bad people. Nobody would accept that argument. And yet tons and tons of American nationalists accept the exact same argument when it's outside of the imaginary line called the United States of America. Over there, if you're just blowing stuff up and randomly firing a machine gun in a city with your bullets flying who knows where, well, it's war. These are the price we... No, morality doesn't change depending on which side of an invisible line you're on. So what the U.S. troops are doing is absolutely immoral. They're endangering a hell of a lot of people, even if some of the people they're fighting against really are bad and nasty, and some totally are. And I would never claim otherwise. Saddam was an evil bastard. I'm glad he's dead. If he's dead. I assume he's dead. And there are lots and lots of aggressors in lots of other governments. I'm not at all saying, oh, everybody else is nice, it's just the U.S. military is mean. No, anybody who commits aggression is the bad guy. Anybody who uses only defensive force is the good guy. Trouble is, government militaries never limit themselves to purely defensive force. So you see them blowing stuff up and pointing guns at people and kicking down doors. I mean, I swear to uphold the Constitution and protect it from all enemies, foreign and domestic, and then they're kicking down doors. Really? Where was your probable cause to boot down that guy's door and point a machine gun in his face and say, are you one of the bad guys? Or do you think the principle just doesn't apply outside the line? The fact that all U.S. troops swear to uphold and protect the Constitution, and the only excuse is, well, it doesn't apply outside the magic line. Legally, it doesn't. But philosophically and morally, of course it does. And the founders even said these are unalienable rights. They're inherent. They're not the result of legislation, which means they apply outside the line just as much as inside. So troops swear loyalty to this set of ideas and then constantly violate it on the other side of the world. Randomly stop people. Really? What was your probable cause to stop every car coming down the road there? And now they're starting to do that in this country too. Yeehaw. Because people are getting used to it and they're thinking, well, if this is what it takes for security. So, no, first of all, obviously the troops are not protecting freedom over there. They are violating the freedom of lots and lots of individual human beings. And the fact that they aren't American makes no freaking difference. If you randomly stop people and detain people and declare a curfew, point guns at people, kick people's doors down, no probable cause, just kind of, there might be bad guys around here, you are absolutely the enemy of freedom. I've said this before, it upsets people, I don't care, it's the truth. A hell of a lot of U.S. troops have done things that have made it so they deserved to be shot. Their intended victims had every right to shoot them. If you go into somebody's house with a machine gun in your hands and you kick down their door, they have the right to protect themselves and defend their home and kill you. And the fact that you have an American flag on your shoulder makes no stinking difference at all. So no, the U.S. military does not make us safer. It does not make us more free. In fact, the whole terrorism thing, contrary to the comic book version of what's going on, the only reason anybody has for actually being a terrorist against the U.S. is in protest of what the U.S. government is doing in our name. So anybody who hates America, first of all, that's mushy-headed pack mentality on their part, but the only reason they do that is because of what the U.S. military is doing. And they think Americans are doing that. And I think, no, stupid mercenaries are doing that. I didn't do that. Please don't blow me up. I don't like it when they do that. But people on both sides think in the pack mentality mode. But obviously, the troops aren't, they're not protecting the freedom of the people they're randomly detaining and harassing and torturing and shooting. They're also not protecting our freedoms because the people they're fighting against were never a threat to our freedoms. They may be a threat to the other people, and again, defensive force is justified, but to pretend that Iraq was going to invade us and take over and conquer us and enslave us, or Iran, North Korea, North Vietnam before, it's ridiculous to pretend that any of these were ever a threat. And if anybody wants to say, well, what about China, or what about Russia, first of all, you could combine both of their militaries, they still wouldn't have a prayer of conquering 100 million armed Americans. Nice joke. When a citizenry is that well armed. I mean, look at Afghanistan. Russia has tried how many times to conquer them? U.S. has tried how many times to conquer them? Just normal people with guns, and they just don't give up, and they don't stop fighting. Vietnam was another prime example of, you can have the biggest war machine you want and all the big fancy toys, and you have some people who are determined to stop you. Again, this has nothing to do with right or wrong. Just, you have normal people with guns on the ground, good luck winning, and they didn't. They lost in Vietnam. They pretended to win in Iraq, kind of, sort of, but they didn't. Insurgents kept going. You cannot defeat an armed populace, and this country has way more armed people who know how to shoot. Hunters and gun enthusiasts, millions and millions of them, way more so than any other country in the world. The idea that any military is a threat to us is ridiculous. And the thing is, the people who say, well, China or Russia, well, nice excuse, but the U.S. military isn't even fighting them. So what, your argument is China would have invaded us if we didn't blow up Iraq? Nice logic. Like, that's The people that the U.S. military is over there shooting at are zero threat at all to my freedom or yours. None. And to pretend otherwise is just to fall into the trap of the tyrants who say, if we don't have power, nasty things will happen to you. And it's just totally bogus. And again, if anything, the military is making insurgents and terrorists who blame America for what the U.S. mercenaries are doing. I don't particularly want to be blamed for what some misguided mercenary is doing on the other side of the world wearing an American flag on his shoulder. I didn't do that. I don't support that. I don't like that. Please don't blow me up because he did that. But because of the pack mentality on all sides, this creates perpetual war and perpetual violent conflict, and it doesn't make anybody safer. And, as has been the case forever, fighting foreign wars is always used as an excuse for domestic oppression. James Madison even talked about this. Oh, now we're at war, so heck with your civil rights. And you can see it all over the place. We're going to frisk you and detain you because there's a war on terror going on. So we get to treat you, the American people, like criminals because of some vague threat out there that's really scary, and they're everywhere, despite the fact that they never seem to accomplish anything. Somehow they're all powerful and all-knowing, but never accomplish anything. And because of that, we get to frisk you and search you and throw away all your rights. And so the idea that big, powerful military and police is protecting our freedoms, it is the only threat to our freedom. The only threat to the freedom of the American people is the U.S. government. And the U.S. military, I'm sure lots of soldiers start with good intentions, maybe some still have good intentions, but what they are doing is not helping America in the slightest. It's not making us more free, it's making us less free. It's not making us more safe, it's making us less safe. And I just want to end by saying the worst part of authoritarianism and statism is that it takes people's goodness, combines it with propaganda and deception, and what comes out the other end is evil. And lots of soldiers join up for good intentions, for good reasons. They actually think they're going to fight for freedom and justice. And then they become fuel for the authoritarian monster. And this is true of voters. It's true in 100 different ways. Tyrants can't just come out and say, hey, we want to be evil tyrants and rule the world. Can we please? Because everybody would say, no, you can't. They have to use deception to trick people into giving up their freedom and giving up their power and giving up their money. And the only way to do that is to tell them something bad is going to happen. If we don't do this, something really horrible is going to happen. And a lot of Americans still fall for it. We're going to be invaded and enslaved, and our freedoms will be taken away if not for perpetual warmongering. And what makes it so horrible and so sad is that it's the good intentions and the bravery and the caring about truth and justice that fuels evil. Because the tyrants can take the good intentions and the bravery and yada yada yada, combine it with deception and propaganda, and trick people into committing evil. And the biggest lie is the belief in authority. And as much as we like to look at other groups and say, well, those were the bad guys, it's the same everywhere. It's been the same everywhere for centuries. Most of the people who fought on the side of the Nazis, most of the Germans were good people. They were duped into thinking, this is good, this is righteous, this is defending us. Same thing in Red China, same thing in the Soviet Union, same thing in the United States. Decent people are duped into doing evil because they're told that it's good. And the saddest thing is to watch the debates between people trying to say, you've been duped, and to watch these basically good people saying, no, I hate you for criticizing what the troops are doing. And they just don't want to see, they don't want to admit that they were duped. Thankfully, lots and lots and lots of veterans are now saying, yeah, I was totally duped. I joined for good reasons. I thought it was about truth, freedom, justice, yada, yada, yada. And I figured out, no, I'm just a mercenary for big corporations and these power-happy politicians. So thankfully, some people are waking up. But this is what the tyrants are so good at, is pitting us against each other. So you have veterans who are outraged that anybody would say, what you did didn't serve freedom, it didn't serve justice. Yeah, every once in a while a veteran actually stopped the bad guy from hurting somebody innocent. Outstanding. I'm glad when that happens, whether you're wearing a uniform or not. But by and large, government militaries do not serve freedom and for anybody in the world. They do not serve justice in the long term for anybody. And the hardest thing is for somebody who's devoted their life and put their life on the line to hear somebody else say, we appreciate your good intentions, but it was totally misguided. You did that for nothing. And after Vietnam, lots and lots of veterans figured out for themselves, we did that for nothing. I'm here to tell you, if you're a member of the U.S. military, what you are doing for nothing.